So I've been coming to MCC Boston for a while now. Honestly, I don't even remember when I first came. When I first started seminary years ago is when I first came here. And I came with my ex-wife. And so many of you likely know, remember my ex-wife Jillian, she used to come here as well. And about a year and a half ago, we decided to get divorced. And I love her and I care for her. And it's because I care for her, because we care for one another, that we decided to get divorced, because that's what would be best for each of us. And in that time, since I got divorced, my sense of humor has changed a little bit. And I think divorce jokes are the funniest thing out there. Unfortunately, I don't really know a lot of divorced people, so no one else thinks that they're funny. So I often tell them to just horror in response. Recently, one of my friends said something was unexpected, and I said, you know what else is unexpected? And she didn't say anything, and I said, divorce. She was horrified by that, this, what is it? I don't know, a little while ago, we were in the kitchen, so I pastor at a dinner church, and we get together and we have our whole service over a meal. So that, of course, includes cooking. And a few of us were in the kitchen, and someone was using the blender that was it's an old blender, it was kind of going all over the place. And she said, this blender just quit. And I said, like, I quit my marriage. And so I didn't actually quit my marriage. That makes it sound like I just gave up on it, and I didn't. That wasn't the case. My ex-wife and I, we spent a lot of time discerning what was right for us. So we didn't quit. It was very, we went into it with a lot of care. So it was unexpected. And I do find a lot of humor in it now, as hard as it was, because while I can find all of the humor, and I think that these jokes are so funny, even though nobody else does, it was a difficult thing, and it was hard, and it was scary, and it was something, though, that we had to turn and face head on in order to get through it. The scripture we read this evening about the venomous serpents is especially interesting to me because I'm terrified of snakes. I'm like super afraid of them, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I live in New England, and we don't really have very many venomous snakes here, if any at all. And I'm more likely probably to encounter a wild turkey than I am a venomous snake. But I'm scared of them anyway. And each time I see a snake, I have this really fun response where I kind of squeal and jump at the same time. It's not embarrassing in the slightest when I'm with others. But I also love hiking in the woods, and the woods is where the snakes live. And if anyone's been up to Middlesex Fells, just up here, that's the snake's home. There are a lot of snakes in there, right? Yes, there are so many. Every time you go, you're probably going to see a snake. And so I'll go out to go for a hike, and I'll start on the trail, and like it's a narrow place, or maybe I can't see that far. I'll kind of pause and like, there's probably a snake up there. I don't know if I should go. And then I'll start thinking of all these reasons why maybe I should go home. Like, well, if I squeal, I might scare somebody, and then they'll be scared. So I should probably just leave. Or, walking on the street is a lot of fun too. I could just walk on. I don't need to be in the woods. And I'll start telling myself all these reasons for why it would be okay to just turn around and leave. But if I did that, then I wouldn't get to experience all that I find in the woods. Because it's in the woods that I experience God most intensely. And so if I stop myself from going in there, then I don't get to experience it. So I try not to let my fear take control of my actions. Last week at some point I sent something to my girlfriend. I found something online and I sent it to her. Something about the woods being awesome. And I said, that's not exactly what I would say, but in the woods I feel more. And she responded and asked more of what. And I said, yes. And then I followed it up and I tried to explain exactly what it is that I feel more of, but it's one of those feelings that doesn't really have any of the words, you just kind of have to feel it. I feel more myself, and my senses are heightened, so I'm feeling more. And I feel God so intensely, and when I'm in the trees and the dirt and I can feel God moving and just know that God is part of everything and part of me and just all around me, and I can breathe better. But in order to get to that place, I have to first face that fear of the snakes that I'm going to find and move forward, face it and move forward into it. And so this was similar with my divorce. It was this hard and scary thing, and it felt like it would be easier to just go and walk on the street than it would to actually have to go through this process. But if my wife and I wanted to grow and to be our best selves and support one another, then we had to turn and look at that and to face it head on. And it would have been easier, or maybe it would have been easier to just sort of say, we're going to do this thing and just go about our separate ways and not really look at it too much and just hope that maybe it just leaves us and disappears. But instead of doing that, we turned and we faced that hard thing head on. And I may have shared this story at some point with folks before, but when we decided to get divorced, and together we did that, and we wanted to be sure that we were doing this in a way that felt right for us and that really brought things together. And so we decided to go out in the woods, of course, where I experience God most intensely, and she does as well, so that felt like the right place for us to be. And we took this jar of sand that we had, and when we got married during our wedding, we had 2 different jars of sand, 2 different colors, and we poured those 2, we each took a jar, and we poured them into this larger jar together and let the sand come together, showing our lives sort of coming together in this way that couldn't be separated. And though we have physically separated, we will never actually be able to separate our lives and all the experiences that we had. We spent the whole of our adult lives together until this point. So we took that jar of sand up into the woods and we walked for a while, and while we were walking, we told each other, we thanked each other for all that we had done for one another, and we apologized for all the things that we didn't do, all the reasons why we had to get divorced. And we talked about what we appreciated about each other and our relationship, and we got to some spot in the woods, and we took that jar of sand that we had that was all mixed together, and we poured it back into 2 smaller jars, so that we each had this piece that we could take with us to remind us of all that we had been through, all of the really wonderful things, and also the super hard things, the reason that we had chosen to separate, the many reasons why we had chosen to separate, and to bring that with us as part of our journey. So we really had to turn and look at that and face the divorce head on if we wanted to move into a place that was better for each of us, and to go through all of the wonderful things that we have found since then. So it's in turning and facing those really difficult things that help us to grow, and that's in the place where we often find God. So this is Lent. We're in our time of Lent now, so 40 days for folks who are observing Lent, these 40 days that we remember leading up to Jesus' death and resurrection. So you may or may not be have a Lenten practice of some sort, whether you've decided to give something up or take something on for these 40 days. And my friend's spouse and I, my person who is more than my friend but also not my spouse because it's not romantic, and this word that we've created because she's my everything but also not my romantic partner, so she's my friend's spouse. She and I every year do a Lenten practice together. And this year we decided to give up dairy. And she and I are both vegetarian already, so this essentially we're vegan for these 40 days, perhaps after, but at least for these 40 days. And during Lent, there's a Sabbath day each week, and so many folks will observe that Sabbath and have whatever it is that you've given up for those 40 days. So that means it's 40 days, I have to last 6 days, and then I can have some pizza if I want it. And it feels like this feels really long, the 40 days, and those 6 days feel like super long. I find myself making some justification, kind of like I do with the snake. Maybe I should just go. I do the same thing with maybe I should just eat the cheese, because if my friend already bought the pizza and she's going to throw it away, it's wasteful, and God wouldn't like it if I'm wasting things. And Jesus didn't waste anything, so I should probably just eat it. I haven't yet. I have not yet given it. Lent isn't over though, so ask me in a couple weeks how I'm doing. But those 6 days and these 40 days can feel long. And thinking about the Israelites who were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, my time feels like nothing. This time that I'm spending feels like nothing. And so it's no wonder that folks were complaining about this, eating this same bread over and over and over and over again every day. And when are we going to be there? And when can we have some other food and drink? And folks complaining, and then after that complaint, God sending these venomous serpents that bit people and they died. And then folks turned to Moses and asked for prayer, and Moses prayed, and then God didn't take away the snakes, but instead gave a solution and had Moses build up this serpent of bronze that people, if they were bit, they could then look to this serpent and they would be healed. So God didn't come in and take away what was harmful and just make everything super easy, but God did have something that allowed for healing. So believing in God doesn't mean that life is just easy. It doesn't mean there are no obstacles because I believe in God and everything's just going to be fine and easy all the time, but that belief helps orient me and turns me towards something. And so when I'm having these difficult times, I can follow the guidance of God and turn in the direction that I need to move forward towards these difficult things. And it's interesting in this story that it is the thing that caused the pain, that caused the suffering, That was the thing that then also healed people. So it was the venomous serpents that were biting people and harming them and killing them, and then it is also the serpent that folks had to look to in order to be healed. So sometimes it's the things that have caused us harm that we need to turn and examine and face head on in order to experience that growth and find ways that we may move through that with the guidance of God. So I invite you to think a little bit now, as it is this time of Lent, to reflect a little bit on what is it that brings you fear? What is it that you're afraid of? And what might it look like when you turn and face those things head on? And where might you find God in that? And so during this time of Lent, it's the 4th week, so we still have a couple of weeks left, to be thinking about that a little bit. What is this journey of Lent for you, and what is it that you are facing, and where is it that you're finding God? And I invite you to perhaps share that with folks as you think of those things, but the way that, what it is that has caused us harm, where it is that we're suffering, and how we might move forward with God through that. So thank you. Amen.